Hello and welcome to Wednesday Debate Live with Taghreed Hussein here on Nile TV International. Tonight, a very special episode and a very distinctive guest. We're talking Egypt and India and our progress in bilateral relations. As we all know, India has always been a land of surprises from centuries ago, with mysteries that are still unsolved and even difficult to explain. It's the land of glory and the world's most colorful cultural and spiritual country. It's the beautiful India, and indeed land known for its deeply traditional customs that are endlessly surprising. Through Nile TV International, the voice of Egypt to the whole world, we are going to spend the coming hours in order to explore India and discover India, not only exploring its everlasting, fascinating beauty, but also knowing more about how India has become the fastest growing major economy despite of the different global challenges that are happening today. So welcome to India, the destination that comprises beauty, richness of history, enormous diversity, as well as the modern technology, the innovation, and also the space missions. Not to mention also that India has become an increasingly important player vis-à-vis the global stage and one of the most influential countries in the whole world of politics today, with the presence of across the major continents and whose influence continues and remains always. India is a land full of surprises. Dear viewers, we are really honored to have with us tonight my guest of honor, our very distinctive guest, His Excellency Ambassador Ajit Gupte, in the Ambassador of India to Egypt. Your Excellency, thank you so much for coming to Nile TV studios.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Pleasure is ours. Together with His Excellency Ambassador Gupte, we are going to take a closer look at the progress of bilateral relations between the two countries in light of the key roles in the world today, be it political, economic, or social. We'll be also exploring the important roles of Egypt and India in the present world and their influence across the different continents. We'll tackle President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's participation in the G20 summit that was held in New Delhi upon an invitation from India's Prime Minister, His Excellency Narendra Modi, and shedding light also on the most significant messages that President Sisi had sent to the whole world. Let us first check this report and we'll be back.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi participated in the 18th G20 summit that took place in New Delhi from the 9th to the 10th of September upon an invitation from India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which reflects the close relations between Egypt and India, as well as New Delhi's keenness on Cairo's participation in a summit that was held amid critical international conditions. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi represented Africa and the developing countries in the G20 summit, addressing various issues of concern, especially as Egypt currently chairs the new Partnership for Africa's Development and the UN Climate Change Conference COP27. President al-Sisi urged stronger integration of developing countries in the global economy in an equitable manner to promote investments, economic growth, and development for all parties, calling on G20 leaders to support developing countries in achieving sustainable development amid international crises that impact food and energy security. The President also called on developed nations to fulfill their commitments within international agreements and mechanisms to address climate change and empower developing countries to increase their reliance on renewable sources of energy. President al-Sisi highlighted the importance of technological transformation to increase productivity and generate new jobs for growth and investment, stressing the need to bridge the huge technological gap among countries to ensure a better future for humanity in its entirety. On the sidelines of the G20 summit, President al-Sisi held meetings with various world leaders. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also participated in the African-European mini-summit, which saw the participation of leaders and representatives from various countries discussing a host of issues of mutual interest, especially the African Union's membership in the G20, concerning which President al-Sisi said that such move represents a step in the right direction to provide the opportunity and put the continent's priorities on the international agenda. Throughout the G20 summit, President Sisi called for addressing imbalances in the global financial structure, developing international finance institutions, and providing durable solutions for the structural problems facing developing countries. These problems include, in particular, growing debt, the diminishing effectiveness of development aid, and challenging conditions for obtaining it, a widening chasm on the way to sustainable development, and a just transition to low-carbon economies.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Gupte, close relations binding, of course, Egypt and India. We've been working together hand in hand and taking, of course, our bilateral relations and cooperation into higher levels.
Yes, well, India and Egypt have always enjoyed very close ties. The relations go back nearly 4,000 years ago,
Yeah.
as both countries were ancient civilizations. We've had very close cooperation since the countries became independent, and it is well known that our founding fathers cooperated closely with each other. There's very close friendship between President Nasser and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, and together we founded the non-aligned movement. Now, coming to more recent times, it is a coincidence that President Sisi and Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power in the same year in 2014, and President Sisi had visited India twice, in 2015 for the India-Africa Forum Summit, and then in October 2016 for a state visit.
Yeah.
Now, our Prime Minister very much wanted to come, but due to the COVID pandemic, his visit had to be called off. But he paid a historic visit here in June 2023.
Yes.
And I must point out that this year has been very momentous in bilateral relations.
Yeah.
We first had the visit of President Sisi to India as the chief guest for the Republic Day.
Yes.
I would like to emphasize that this was the first time ever that a president of Egypt came to India as the chief guest for Republic Day, and this was a very successful visit. And a contingent from the Egyptian armed forces took part in the Republic Day, and in fact
Yes.
they led the parade. And
Yeah.
this has been seen and noted by almost everybody in India. During the visit, both leaders agreed to establish a strategic partnership between both countries. Now, soon thereafter, as I said, our Prime Minister visited in Egypt. This was again a very successful visit, and during his visit, the strategic partnership agreement was signed by both leaders.
Yes.
And then we've had the privilege of receiving and welcoming President Sisi for the G20 summit. So as you can see, in the last 9 months, we've had 3 visits at the state level, which is something which is incredible.
Yes, incredible, definitely amazing, and it reflects how our relations, binding our relations and between both countries are taken to higher levels. Your Excellency, it was an invitation on behalf of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to His Excellency President Sisi to participate in the 18th G20 summit in New Delhi. Significance of Egypt's participation in that important gathering, and definitely we have important meetings also taking part on the sidelines between both leaders.
Yes. Now, once India took over the presidency of the G20, it was our resolve that the G20 should not only discuss issues which pertain to the G20 countries, which are at the end of the day a collection of the most industrialized, more developed countries. we felt very strongly that the G20 during our presidency should also address issues relating to developing countries, known as the Global South. We were keen to bridge the growing divide between the North and the South and the West and the East. Now, we are going through a fluid situation in international relations. Unfortunately, there have been a succession of crisis situations. The COVID pandemic, the Ukraine conflict in particular has disrupted the food and energy security. It has led to very high inflation, devaluation of currencies in many developing countries. So it has been our effort during the presidency to invite developing countries, and Egypt, naturally, as the most populous country in the Arab world and enjoying a very strategic location, was naturally invited, along with 8 other countries as guest countries.
Yes, it was a very important participation, Your Excellency. The G20 summit in New Delhi was held this year under the theme One Earth, One Family and One Future. So this is the main topic of the G20 summit, which is actually crucial, and we can find, Your Excellency, that reading the theme itself shows the importance of the gathering and conveys also the message behind it. We're talking one Earth that we are sharing, one family, and definitely we're working because it's a one future.
This actually is based on a very ancient Indian concept going back several thousand years ago. And in Sanskrit it is known as Vasudeva Kutumbakam. Vasudeva Kutumbakam. That means that the whole world is one. And even thousands of years ago, this was a concept which was there, and it has become popular over the centuries. Now, India felt, when it took over the G20 presidency, that the focus of all the participants should be on trying to find solutions to the problems which the world faces. Developing and developed countries are today facing major problems such as climate change. And it is the developing countries which have been particularly hit hard. As I mentioned, they are all facing problems due to high inflation, disruption of food supplies, because a lot of food grains were being imported from Russia and Ukraine. There has been disruption in fuel supplies, fertilizer, and other essential commodities. So it has been our endeavor, and I think we have met with a lot of success, that during the G20, the focus has been not to just have political disagreement, but to come to a consensus on critical issues such as climate change, debt restructuring, building resilient supply chains, and so on and so forth.
Yes, very important actually outcome and fruit of the meetings. The President participated in the G20 summit in his capacity, of course, as the President of Egypt, but also as the chair of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, the NEPAD, and definitely India is cooperating with that important forum with the NEPAD. There has been many messages on behalf of the President through his speech where he delivered at the opening session of the G20 summit. The President called for a comprehensive approach to tackle the global challenges and to achieve the shared goals. President Sisi had stressed on the role of the G20 at the forefront, mainly notably in addressing the imbalances in the global financial structure, developing international financial institutions, providing solutions to the structural problems facing the developing nations. So the President had stressed the importance of urging developing states' integration into the global economies at India's G20. So, Your Excellency, India's presidency of the G20 was definitely a very important opportunity to give a voice for the sense of the needs of the global South, isn't it?
That's right. As I said, we wanted to ensure that India's presidency of the G20 is not a routine affair, but that it makes a lot of difference. One of the first things we did was to organize a virtual summit called the Voice of Global South. And more than 100 developing countries took part in this virtual summit in January this year including Egypt, of course. And we invited the leading ministers of developing countries to articulate on various issues the main grievances that they had. So this was very useful in collecting the views of developing countries. And thereafter, look, during the G20, we've had 200 meetings. And the meetings have been held all over India in more than 60 cities across various vertical platforms on different issues. And there has been a brainstorming, very intensive discussions between all the leaders on the main challenges that the world faces. India itself has offered to the world, in particular the developing countries, our own success stories. We've had very remarkable success stories in areas such as financial inclusion, means providing, ensuring that everybody has bank accounts, access to finance, including microfinance. We've also highlighted the digital transformation, because in India, within a few years, everybody has started using a digital form of payments. We have been able to create a biometric card system which ensures that there is very leakage in direct benefit transfers. So taken together, we are offering this as digital physical infrastructure.
Yes.
And which has been able to transform India, and we are prepared to cooperate in particular with developing countries in developing this.
Yes, Your Excellency, we've been working hand in hand on our strategic partnership and on the ongoing cooperation between both countries, Egypt and India, and we've worked together in several directions, actually. And as Your Excellency has mentioned, the last year has witnessed great successes, while amazing visits on the presidential and state levels. Where are we today?
You see, the bilateral relations between India and Egypt is multifaceted. We have had for many decades close trade and investment ties. Egypt is one of India's largest trade partners in Africa. Indian companies have also invested considerable amounts in Egypt over the years. In fact, our bilateral trade in 2021-22 grew by 75% to reach a level of US dollars 7.25 billion. I'm glad to tell you that the trade was evenly balanced, and in fact India became the third largest export destination for Egypt. Indian companies have invested over $3.3 billion in Egypt in large manufacturing industries, and together they provide employment to about 38,000 Egyptians. We also contribute to about 5% of Egypt's exports to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to this, we have had very close cooperation in defense and military. In fact, India just took part in the Operation Bright Star, the largest military exercise in Egypt. This was the first time that India has taken part. And you'll be surprised to know that the Indian defense contingent came from not only from the army, but also from the Air Force and the Navy. And it was the second largest, just after the United States. Now, similarly, we've had a number of visits of Indian defense delegations to Egypt. We've also welcomed several of your defense delegations to India, including for the first ever exercises between the special forces in the desert of Rajasthan in India in January this year. We also have a lot of cooperation in all fields between various ministries. In fact, I'm very happy to say that 10 of your ministers have visited India between January to September. And I'm sure this will lead to more cooperation. We also have very close cultural contacts and people-to-people exchanges.
Yes, for the cultural cooperation and the people-to-people relations, we can never, of course, forget India by the Nile and forget the different festivities, those are definitely very important and vivid examples of this sense of our strong partnership culturally. Of course, the introduction of the yoga culture and the love of yoga here to Egyptians. Tell me more, Ambassador, about our cultural cooperation.
Well, what I find amazing in Egypt is that Indian culture, particularly Bollywood, is popular at all levels of society. So whether it is ministers or senior officials or ordinary people, they have all seen and have been influenced by Bollywood. And many of the youngsters also keep up with Bollywood even now, which is a very good thing. I think the Egyptian people find that the Indian values, close family ties, are something that they appreciate, that they like. Now, in addition, the Egyptians are very fond of literature. They have read Tagore, they have read our classics. They are also fond of classical Indian music and dance. And I must say that at our cultural center, Makik, we have many Egyptians who are taking part in yoga classes, who are also learning traditional Indian dance. And in fact, I find that yoga is becoming increasingly popular across Egypt.
Yes, from culture to the BRICS and Egypt joining that important economic bloc, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed Egypt to join the BRICS economic bloc. Definitely a very significant step forward for Egypt.
That's right. Well, there has been a lot of discussion about BRICS expanding, and as our Prime Minister said, India has supported the expansion. We have welcomed new members, and with all of these countries, we have historic and deep ties, and their inclusion in BRICS will certainly benefit the relations. The expansion of BRICS is also an example to other international organizations, because there is a need to reform many international organizations, including those which were established just after World War II. And I think the growing role of BRICS in a multilateral world has an important implication for many countries.
Yes, India as an economic giant is definitely keen to boost investments further in Egypt, and I know that many Indian businessmen come to Egypt in order to sign contracts and enjoy the investment climate in the country. Your Excellency, if we talk about boosting Indian investments in Egypt and about knocking doors in different specialities and new areas of cooperation in that respect, what would you say?
Well, due to the intensified high-level political exchanges, there is certainly more interest among the Indian companies to invest in Egypt. Last year, 3 of our leading companies in renewable energy signed MOUs to develop green hydrogen in Egypt. The total value of the 3 MOUs is $18 billion US. 2 of the companies are actively exploring their proposals. Some of them are looking at the possibility of setting up solar parks and wind farms. They will be carrying out preliminary studies. Now, this is a new area for Egypt, and I think there is some modification required in terms of policy framework which will encourage investors. Similarly, we have some large Indian corporates which are looking at investing in Egypt. I think all investors like to have an open and transparent system, a level playing field, and I think that they need to have some assurance that their investments are safe and that eventually that the profits they make can be repatriated.
Yes, we have, of course, we all know India's golden rule in investment, the Indian experience of introducing reforms in the wake of any sort of economic crisis. So we have many lessons taught from the Indian experience in that regard.
You see, the Indian economy was also dominated by the public sector to some extent. But we also had a lot of control on the economic activity. We had licensing. The government decided how much is to be produced by which company, including private companies. So when we faced a crisis in 1991, the government ended the license Raj. They started a process of de-licensing, and all the quantitative controls on manufacture of various consumer goods were lifted. Now this led to a boom in India's manufacturing sector, and over the years we also started getting a lot of foreign investment. So together, the growing strength of the Indian private sector and increasing foreign investment, openness and transparency has led to a flood of foreign investment. I think so far we have received about $600 billion in foreign investment. Many Indian companies have emerged as global leaders in engineering, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, and of course in the IT field. So the Indian economy, because it was unshackled, the restrictions were removed, the private sector was allowed to play its role. The Indian economy has continued to grow, and as of today it is the 5th largest economy in the world. Last year our GDP amounted to $3.75 trillion, and the IMF has just predicted that by 2027 India will emerge as the 3rd largest economy in the world.
Congratulations, that's a great hit. Your Excellency, many ongoing investments in the different fields, name it, pharmaceuticals, we're talking software, handicrafts, small and medium-sized enterprises initiatives. More than one interesting field that binds our cooperation together, knocking doors, also new specialities.
I mentioned the interest from India's renewable energy companies in developing green hydrogen. I hope that is concretized because it will add a new and very significant dimension to our bilateral relations. There are some very large possible investments in manufacturing, but they are waiting for some policy measures to be clarified. In software, we have the first Indian company, Tech Mahindra, which came to Egypt last year. But your Minister of IT has been to India a few times this year. He has interacted with many Indian software companies. And I hope this will lead to more Indian companies coming here. We have also started some cooperation in the higher education sector. We have the first tie-up between an Indian university and an Egyptian university, and they will start enrollment of classes in areas like artificial intelligence, quantum mechanics, and AI this year.
Yes.
So these are new areas where India and Egypt can work together.
Yes, definitely, hand in hand. We need to go together to the moon too, you know. It was like hitting headlines, India's successful landing on the moon. That was a real hit, hitting headlines. And we're going to know now from Ambassador Gupte more about the backstage. How did it happen, this hit? Of course, lots of preparations, lots of hard work behind, and congratulations on a great success, Ambassador.
Yes, thank you. I mean, you know, one has to work very hard for eventual success.
Yeah.
This was the 3rd launch, and in fact, Chandrayaan-1 was launched, which orbited around the moon. Chandrayaan-2, we tried in 2019 to land the rover, but unfortunately, just a few feet above, it lost control. But Chandrayaan-3 has been a great success. We have made extraordinary achievements in the space sector. These efforts have been largely based on our own indigenous technology. We have a very large team of scientists and engineers working. And the most incredible thing is that India is not only the 4th country to land a probe on the moon, but the first country to land it on the south side, because that side can't be seen. From Earth. So your signals take longer to reach. You can't actually send the signals directly. So it's a truly remarkable achievement, and I'm very happy that many Egyptians know about it. And in fact, most of them say that we are very proud of India's achievement. We
are really proud of India and of the achievement on the successful landing on the moon. Earlier in the video, Ambassador, while we are following on the important visit of President Sisi and participating in the G20, we've been seeing His Excellency also watching the Egyptian monuments, the faces of like King Tut, very popular, our kings and queens. So how far are they appealing in India? Are there special exhibits that are going to run in India for our great ancestors, the pharaohs, and for Indians to explore more about the Egyptian history and culture and kings and queens?
You see, everybody in India knows about Egypt because they have studied about Egypt in the textbooks. Egypt is known as Misra, and even in the villages and small towns, people are aware of Egypt. They may not be aware of some countries in Europe or Central Asia or Latin America, but as an ancient civilization they are aware of Egypt. Now, thanks to the high-level visits, people in India are, almost all of them are aware that President Sisi came. They have followed the Republic Day parade, President Sisi's visit, and then Prime Minister's visit. And social media is also instrumental.
Very powerful.
I think a lot of Indians have seen Prime Minister visiting the pyramids, visiting the Sphinx. So look, I think there is a lot of interest among Indians to visit Egypt. It is one of the countries which most Indians have not visited. It's an undiscovered destination. So I'm sure that once the Egyptian government decides to promote tourism from India, a lot of Indians will come here.
Yes, most welcome, of course, our Indian brothers and sisters. We're working together also in order to move forward our trade exchange, and this is also very important within our cooperation and sense of partnership.
A lot of Indian delegations are coming here to take part in trade fairs and exhibitions in Egypt. We've had, I think, more than 1,000 Indian companies which have come to Egypt in the last 2 years. In fact, even during the pandemic, when Egypt was one of the first countries to start organizing trade fairs and exhibitions, Indian companies came, and I, in fact, went and interacted with almost all of them. They all told me that this is the first country we are visiting during the pandemic, because trade fairs and exhibitions are not being organized. Now, this was true of 2021. Of course, now a lot of the activities have resumed, but the Indians, when they come here to take part in trade fairs, they also do some sightseeing. And they carry the message back that there is a lot of things to be seen in Egypt. It's an enjoyable experience, and I'm sure this will bring more Indian tourists. In fact, I'm happy to tell you that between January to August 2023, the number of Indian tourists which visited Egypt amounted to 90,000. And in comparison, in the same period last year in 2022, 34,000 Indians had visited Egypt. So there is quite a sharp increase.
Lots of opportunities await our relations ambassador, especially the global stage. Where are we today? And let me talk more about the future of our cooperation, Egyptian-Indian relations and cooperation.
I think the future is very bright. The series of high-level visits and engagement that we have had over the last year, the visits by your President to India, by our Prime Minister to Egypt, as I mentioned, a number of your ministers have gone. This establishes a very strong platform. I'm sure that our trade will continue to expand. We are looking at a number of Indian investment proposals which are very large. And as cooperation between the global south increases, I am sure that Egypt will look to having closer cooperation with India in a wide variety of fields, ranging from health, pharmaceuticals to IT, higher education, and also defense.
Yes, of course, technologically speaking, also we can do a lot together, especially bearing into consideration that India is very much progressing in that regard. And as we all know, that there is now the AI revolution that is overwhelming the world. What are we expecting in that field, in the field of technology and IT?
You see, India is regarded as a superpower in IT. Our IT sector has grown by leaps and bounds in the last few years. In fact, last year our exports of IT products and software amounted to more than $270 billion, which is very significant.
Yes.
There are several Indian IT companies which employ 500,000 or 600,000 IT professionals. Egypt would do well to have more collaboration, more cooperation with Indian IT companies. We are also becoming very strong in fintech and startups. There are many things which are being done in India in the fintech and digital platform sector, which are among the most advanced in the world. And in fact, some of your startups had gone to India under the G20 Startup Cooperation, and in fact, 2 of them won a prize.
Great.
So there is a lot of scope for cooperation. I think the more Egypt looks at India and vice versa, the more we will discover the scope for greater cooperation.
Definitely. We are also looking forward to the role of the G20 now, which is at the forefront addressing the imbalances of the global financial structure. How do you see that important bloc providing solutions, meantime, amidst the different challenges, economic challenges that are facing developing countries?
Well, the intensified and very focused discussions that have taken place in the G20 in an effort to address the global challenges has resulted in a number of consensus decisions at the G20 summit. This will need to be followed up by concerned ministers in various sectors, whether it is finance or health, pharmaceuticals, education, etc.
Yeah.
And I am confident that the consensus which has been arrived at will lead to very concrete steps being taken. And there is certainly a good possibility that the G20 as a comparatively a compact group can emerge as an organization which actually offers very substantive solutions to the challenges faced by the world.
Yes, definitely. Ambassador, we've knocked lots of doors together in more than one speciality, and Your Excellency has outlined that. We're talking tourism also as well, because this is a very important story. We are very much interested to welcome our Indian brothers and sisters here in Cairo, and I know that lots of them are interested in our culture and history and the significant and beautiful Egyptian destinations. Well, talking more about the direct flight that is now there, and this definitely has facilitated a lot our presence in India and vice versa, Indians' presence in Egypt. What more? Are there special exhibits like the one His Excellency has seen in India on the sidelines of the G20, such exhibits that are reflecting our culture and history and civilization? What more can we do?
You see, Egypt Air has direct flights from Cairo to Mumbai, or 4 flights a week, and it has from early August started 4 flights a week to Delhi, so people can travel quickly and reach the respective countries. I hope that this leads to an increase in two-way tourism. You rightly mentioned the cultural replicas of Tutankhamun, the mask and also the throne, which were displayed during the G20 summit. Now, Indians, as I told you, are fully aware of Egypt. They would like to come to Egypt and actually explore and discover the ancient civilization of Egypt and also the other attractions. And I'm sure that this is a great opportunity. The Indian Embassy in Cairo is working with your Ministry of Tourism, and in fact just a few weeks ago we had organized a very interesting event where your Minister of Tourism had come and a number of travel agents had come from Egypt, and we will be following up on this. I also hope that Egyptians will travel to India, because there is really so much to discover. We have great diversity, from the towering Himalayas in the north to the deserts of Rajasthan, many forts, palaces, wildlife parks, wildlife sanctuaries, the beaches, to Kerala, which is famous for Ayurveda and yoga. Yes. So I hope that more Egyptians, including you, will travel to India.
Sure, well, we'd love to visit India. India is a fascinating country, the country of beauty. Let us discover India. Let's fly to India in moments, and we'll be back. So those were glimpses of beautiful India, the land of glory, the world's most colorful, cultural and spiritual country, beautiful India. Your Excellency, at the wrap-up of our episode, let me say that the sky is the limit in our bilateral cooperation and strong partnership together. What would you say as we wrap up this interview?
I think over the last year, there has been such a revival in our bilateral relations. Perhaps you can say there's a rediscovery of both countries by
Yes.
leaders, and a very strong foundation has been created, and there are many, many avenues of cooperation. I'm sure that both countries will seize the opportunity to further take the relationship to new heights, and the feeling of friendship which binds the two people is a great cementing factor. And I think this will prove to be a very important factor in the future growth of the relations.
Definitely, Ambassador, the sky is the limit in our relations, binding Egypt and India forward ever. I thank you very much, my guest of honor tonight, His Excellency Ambassador Ajit Gupte, Ambassador of India to Egypt. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you for inviting me.
We wish you always all success on your mission. Thank you so much. And I thank you, dear viewers, for joining us tonight. We had celebrated the strong partnership binding both countries, Egypt and India. Tomorrow, another team. Until then.